Dear Rector Desatori, dear colleagues, dear Andi, it is my great pleasure as current department head to say a few words today in celebration of Hans-Andrea Loeliger, or Andi as we call him in ITED. Andi's relationship with ETH Zurich is, in the truest sense, a lifelong one. He received both his diploma in electrical engineering and his doctorate from this very same institution in 1985 and in 1992, respectively. After a period at Linköping University in Sweden and several years as a technical consultant and co-owner of a consulting firm in Basel, he returned to ETH in 2000 as a full professor at the Signal and Information Processing Lab. He has been here ever since, for 25 years, shaping the field, shaping the department, and shaping the many students who attended his classes and graduated from his group. If you go to his website, you'll find a picture that was probably taken at the time when he started at ETH. Andi's name is inseparably linked to the theory of codes and algorithms on graphs. A first landmark came as early as 1995 with a paper co-authored with Niklas Wiberg and Ralf Kötter, Codes and Iterative Decoding on General Graphs, which essentially redirected the coding theory community toward the framework of general graphs that defines the field to this day. This was a genuine breakthrough, not as synthesis of existing ideas, but a reorientation of how the community thought about the problem. The 2001 paper in IEEE Transactions on Information Theory, co-authored with Frank Xichang and Brendan Frey, then brought this framework to a much wider audience, unifying algorithms as seemingly different as the Viterbi algorithm, the Kalman filter, belief propagation, and turbo decoding under a single elegant computational rule. Together, these two works mark Andi's foundational contribution to the field. Andi then went on to develop the factor graph framework into a practical tool for model-based signal processing, extending it to Gaussian message passing, to non-Gaussian models, to state space systems, and most recently to questions at the intersection of signal processing and machine learning, including neural computation and the mathematical modeling of recurrent neural networks. He also made fundamental contributions to a new approach to analog to digital conversion, work that is as much about circuits as it is about mathematics, a reflection of his unusually broad span from the abstract to the concrete. What strikes those who know his work is the commitment to mathematical depth and clarity. Andi has never been interested in solving the problem of the moment. He has always been interested in understanding, deeply, rigorously, and where possible, beautifully. In an era of fast publication and broad claims, this is a rare and valuable disposition. As a colleague, Andi has been thoughtful and a steady presence. He cares about the department and is actively engaged in department discussions. The ITED colleagues will likely remember him as someone who sometimes voices strong opinions, but he always does so in a respectful manner and is willing to hear counter-arguments. Those who have worked with him on departmental matters will also know another side of Andi, his remarkable precision in formulation. The department's rules and regulations have benefited greatly from his eye for detail, not least during his years as study director. A role that suited him well, which he pursued with thoroughness and dedication. I was told that during his time, he even chaired almost all PhD exams himself. And as a teacher, here too, he has left a mark. He taught courses on algebra and error-correcting codes, on advanced signal analysis, and on topics at the frontier of his own research. He supervised doctoral students with unusual care and directness, keeping groups deliberately small so that each student could benefit from his full attention. That is a choice, and that speaks to his values. Andi, as you leave ETH, or perhaps more accurately, as ETH reluctantly lets you go, you leave behind a body of work that will continue to be read, taught, and built upon for decades. You leave behind students and colleagues whose thinking you have permanently shaped, and you leave behind in this department and this field a standard of intellectual seriousness that is both an aspiration and a challenge to those of us who remain. On behalf of the ITED, and with great warmth, thank you and congratulations. We will definitely miss your wit, sharp and thoughtful comments, level-headedness, and keen eye for details. So, the floor is yours. Thank you.
But thank you very much. So it was wonderful. Thank you. So, okay. Maybe I start by saying that I really always wanted to be an electrical engineer. And what is that? So electrical engineering comprises three areas. On one hand, there's physics, electronic circuits, devices, fields and waves, the very concept of power. There's the digital world, zeros and ones, VLSI software, and there is information science is not an official term. I'm not sure it's a good term. I don't know any better. The mathematics of signal systems, information, communication, control, and machine learning. And these are obviously different areas, but they're also deeply interconnected. And I always like to think of all these things as three different sides of the same thing, not as three different things at all, actually. Maybe I should also comment on what I mean by always. So let's not debate about the exact literal meaning of that. But maybe I just have two little episodes to illustrate what I mean here. So remember in high school, probably the last year or the year before, we were supposed to give a talk in biology on a subject of our choice. And I choose to talk about neurons, biological nerve cells, so membranes and action potentials and ion channels, that kind of thing. And to conclude our presentation, I built an electronic model of such a neuron. I remember it had three synapses, two excitatory and one inhibitory, which you could operate by push buttons. And there was a huge analog voltmeter that showed the potential inside the cell. And when it fired, there was a flashlight and a mechanical relay clacked audibly. So it was very effective. And there was one episode, and the other episode, just a few weeks ago, I happened to meet a classmate from high school. He reminded me that on another occasion, probably in the German course, we were also asked to give a presentation on a subject of our choice. So I talked about AND gates and OR gates and Boolean algebra and how to make digital computers. So after all this, you may wonder, but I did get a wonderful wife after all. Okay, so these past 40 years, in fact, I was mostly concerned with concepts and methods. In this last bullet, the information science part. And today, I basically want to illustrate what I mean by concepts and methods by some vistas from the past 10 years. They may seem unconnected. On the surface, they are unconnected, but actually, to me, they're all deeply connected in many different ways, which perhaps doesn't come out. But I just think of this picture. If you think of the Matterhorn, this alpine scenery, and you think the palm trees in Lugano, they look very different on first sight, but still, it's just 100 kilometers away, and they do belong to the same country. Okay. So, vista number one. There are three names on top. Jinhyung Yu was my PhD student. Euclid is a Greek mathematician, 300 BC. Jim Massey was my PhD supervisor, which we loved very much. I am so much indebted to him. And some of the older ones, I'm afraid there are not so many here now at this point, will remember him fondly as well. So this is about error correcting codes. So the Reed-Solomon codes are a classic type of error-correcting code, so don't worry what that is. And the two of maybe the two most popular decoding algorithms for these codes are, on the one hand, an algorithm is called Euclidean algorithm, which is really invented by Sugiyama, so it should be called the Sugiyama algorithm, and the Berlica-Massey algorithm, and as I said, Massey, that was my PhD supervisor here. These two algorithms, on one hand, they are related, but in complicated ways. If you read these papers about these relations, and then you say, somehow it works, but you say, at the end, right? Okay. Then, on the other hand, they're fundamental algorithms. The Euclidean algorithm is really, if you look at it, it's looked like the GCD algorithm, the computer greatest common divisors of integers or polynomials, which is kind of the hello world algorithm of computer algebra. So, but in this case, it computes something different. It does not compute greatest common divisors at all. And the other thing is the Berlica-Massey algorithm, too, has deep connections to fundamental topics in mathematical system theory and parts of mathematics. So these are not just, obscure things. And so it's interesting to think about what's going on here. And so the picture that as you know, you came about and now looks like that. So both the Berle-Massey algorithm and the Euclidean algorithm are just easy, very easy special cases, very natural, implementations, if you like, of one same algorithm. And the same algorithm, partial inverse algorithm, actually solves a particular mathematical problem, the partial inverse problem, which is a new problem. It didn't exist in the literature as far as we know. So formulating this was an important step. But this is what this so-called Euclidean algorithm in this case actually computes. It has a unique solution, and that is what actually these algorithms do. There's even a third special case, which at the bottom right, which doesn't seem to have a compelling use case so far. We haven't seen one, but it's interesting to see these things. Now, maybe I should say something about, so this picture looks nice and easy, and it is. It was not at all easy to get there. In fact, in the very first paper, there was one issue which was unsatisfactory. All the algorithms, if you look at them, look very, very easy and natural and clear, but the proof of the partial inverse algorithm was terribly complicated and very unsatisfactory in that case. It was just too complicated, and we worked very hard, both of us, and we just couldn't do anything about it until much, much later when Xinyoung Yu, in a different context, in one of many generalizations, he came up with a new proof, which finally was was not easy, but not more difficult than the classical proofs of the Berle-Massey algorithm and the Euclidean algorithm, and the picture finally is as it should be. Okay, so this is typical academic research, right? It couldn't say it had immediately great practical value, but simplifications and unifications are an important part of scientific progress. Okay, if we go to the next vista point, so this is practical. It's about signal analysis with a certain new methodology. This mostly carried out by Reto Wildhaber, most of this single-handedly. Of course, it builds on some other ideas, and there were other contributions from my group. So I want to illustrate it by its application to the ECG analysis, so the analysis of electrical, if you have electrodes and measure heartbeats. And they typically we want to identify certain points. So we want to identify where the big thing begins here and here, but we also want to identify this particular point here and here and here, and we want to identify this particular point here and here and here. And doing this properly is very important for medical analysis of that's what doctors want to see, and it's not in general so easy because in biology everything keeps moving all the time. So what you see here, this moving thing, that's basically breathing, and that just exemplifies one of the issues in anything in biological signals. What you see on the bottom is essentially the result of this methodology, which I say a few words about. Namely, this is the thing, the score signal that looks for these things here, and the other things here look for the other events that I mentioned. And so this is something that works in practice. So what it is built of? It's built of three things. Maybe I move directly to the next one. It's one hand built on polynomial models. So in this case, we have for this baseline thing, this breathing thing, that's a third order polynomial. And then in this particular example, which is actually used here, we have straight lines are also polynomials, but actually there's more than one polynomial. There are two straight lines connected by, if you like, by glue condition in this case. So you just say I have two straight lines with arbitrary angles, but they have to connect in this one point. And there's a third effect. This local refers to the situation that we fit this model, the superposition of these things, within certain windows. So this comes with a certain window, this comes with a certain window, and playing with these windows is one of the central insights of this methodology, to have this sort of localization. So at any point in time, you fit such a model, and the core signals I showed in the previous slide are just, you compute the fitting cost, you fit by least squares, and you compare it to the fitting cost if you have only the baseline and not the thing you're actually looking for. This, by its definition, is a number between 0 and 1, so this makes it automatically scale-free, one of the nice things to have. Let me see that I can move here. It's a scale. I apologize, scale-free. It's very robust, very reliable. So this is the opposite of modern machine learning. There's no training data needed at all. Zero. It's completely engineered. It's versatile, as you see in a moment. What about computational efficiency? It's super efficient. If you have efficient recursions for everything, if you move from one point to the next, you essentially can reuse most of the computations. That's the key thing. In the essentially, computations amount to essentially, it's just linear filters with a little thing on top and around it. So it's extremely, accessible to electrical engineers. You can do it in 2D. I mean, you can do it. Reto demonstrate how to do that. Then having this local analytical signal representation means you can mathematically manipulate it. You compute maxima. You can do interpolation. If you have a multi-channel signals, you can compute the delay between two channels analytically. All these things. There are lots of, Reto being not only a fantastic engineer, but also a medical doctor, actually did all the real-world implementations as well himself. ECG analysis, as I kind of sketched in the previous slide, but also in his PhD project, he actually did a 3D, so a volumetric imaging of the electric activity heart from non-standard sensors, namely sensors placed inside the esophagus, which is something you can do, for example, during, you can walk around with it, say, and it's not something, not as a standard ECG is recorded with all sorts of sensors that you have on your body somewhere. You can't just go home with them, right? And with these sensors, for example, you can go home and do other things. And in this is a very complicated thing. Basically, when he suggested the project, I think, wow, this is ambitious. You must be, you're probably kidding, but you're fine with trying. But he managed not only to put this in practice, but this methodology here was used at several different places for completely different types of things that need to be done in this project, and he carried it out, and it works at the end. Okay. But this is actually not an ad hoc method. It's a very principled method. The mathematical perspective is very clear. So if you think about polynomials, well, a local fitting of polynomials, Taylor series are one of the oldest, concepts in analysis. And, if you truncate a Taylor series to few terms, that means a local polynomial representation. But this is much more. You have this multi-component thing, and you can think of it as analyzing signals by a local Hilbert space. At every point in time, it has its own Hilbert space. They're all isomorphic, but nonetheless, they're separate Hilbert spaces. And while as in traditional signal processing, as everyone knows, right, you think of a signal living in a Hilbert space, a whole signal, but here we do it at every point in time, has its own Hilbert space, which is much more flexible. So I think actually this should be standard teaching material. Although probably if you ask a friend in some famous university, so what do you think about this? He said, "Oh, never heard of that. What's that?" So if you hear him say that or her, don't think this is not working. Maybe you should say, maybe it's time that you learn something about it. Okay. As some of you know, we have been associated with the idea of factor graphs for a very long time, and there's been a very large number of PhD students that have contributed to our research until today. What you're trying to do here is kind of a modular approach, a Lego approach, if you like, to models and algorithms at the same time. So this is just exemplifies this thing. So you have a big model, and there are sub-models which you can maybe zoom in and out, and then in this particular, that's actually a paper from this year. It's about how to make these connections so that a certain type of algorithm would work well. So I don't comment it, but I thought there should be at least one example. So there was some hype about this 25 years ago, but hypes pass, as you know, and the hypists go away and go to the next big thing. But actually, in the meantime, there has been steady progress, one step at a time, and especially in the last 2 years, we have made quite a lot of exciting progress. And wait a minute, I have to. I'm not actually saying what all these things are. Things we have just recently, we are in the process of learning these things, right? So much of this at this point has actually not been written up properly, and it requires some sort of a bigger thing. A paper won't do it, some sort of a book or monograph. And basically, so this answers your question. Everyone keeps asking me, what are you going to do after retirement? This will keep me busy for quite some time. So if after this lecture you're going to ask me, what are you going to do after retirement? I know you didn't pay attention on slide 12. Okay. What about deep learning, right? We haven't been living under a rock. For example, there was a large number of papers about kind of properly combining, augmenting Kalman filter idea with deep learning. I probably not say much about that. Just want to point out a very recent master project that was from last year, which I thought was really cool, and we can kind of explain what it is about. So apparently there's this little company that actually from radar signals, so the kind of radars from which you use for rain radar, right? If you look at weather map, you see the rains. So I guess it's this kind of radar stations that they use to kind of watch birds and bats and their migrations, things like that. And so Johannes Nusch had a contact with this company, and he now works for them. And so it was about, can you more in more detail say, from this radar signal, can you say what kind of a bird it is, roughly speaking? That's a rough idea. So his idea was, let's start from a mechanical model of a bird, and by what does roughly speaking what that means? So it means that if you're so if you have a small bird, right, that flaps quickly, it gives a very different radar signal from a large bird that moves very slowly and now has different dimensions. So this mechanical model is a thing with many parameters, so the whole dimensions of the wings and the body and things, everything that might affect the radar signature at the end. And also then the flight patterns too that come in. So that is what we have here. We have this bird model. On one hand, the model of how the body of the bird would look like as a mechanical model, and then flight patterns. And these are lots of model parameters. I didn't count them, so it's probably 24 or something like that. And then he made a simulation chain. So simulations, the thing is, if you just want to identify birds, there are no training data, right? Or certainly not enough to do the dumb neural network approach, where you say we have we have the labeled data and then train some neural network to reproduce this stuff, because you have not enough training data. But this allows to create as many training data as you want by suitable simulations. And in this project, Johannes Nusch, spent a lot of time on the model and the simulation, but also he spent quite a lot of time on this part, the neural network, and then and kept fiddling about both of these things throughout the project. And at the end, actually demonstrated with real radar signals from real birds that he get meaningful parameters out here. And I think, to me, this project, basically, neither I nor any of my PhD students had much to do with it, which just was in the sideline and watching with awe. And but I think this exemplifies how good, solid engineering looks like in the era of big learning. Okay. Okay. So this is a little bit an exotic thing, but a hobby of mine. I have two slides on this. So, as you know, the quantum mechanics is formulated in the unit revolution and measurements, but at the end you have random outcomes. So it's a sort of a statistical model, but the standard categories of statistical models just don't apply to that. It's not a Markov multiple measurements do not form a Markov chain. They don't form a hidden Markov model. All these things are out. And the insight here was that, because we said, wait a minute, is there a way to represent it in factor graphs? But what it really boils down to, you can completely define or correctly describe quantum systems with many variables, many measurements, by a complex value generalization of a joint probability density function. which if you marginalize to the things you actually measure, is just a joint probability mass function, probability density function, but involving all the quantum stuff, it's complex valued. So that can be done. That was the first, and that has a natural characterization. So in some sense, this kind of thing is, and this factorization is a kind of a natural generalization of a hidden Markov model to quantum system. Okay, that's one thing. And actually, I just mentioned that Pascal developed a whole course on quantum information processing based on this insight. But maybe what is more exciting to me is, as you know, in the quantum stuff, there has been this eternal question. If you the axioms are a bit fuzzy about measurement itself. It comes in as an undefined term in the classical understanding. So if you try to understand measurement itself in terms of quantum mechanics, that has remained confusing. Depending on how you will look at it or try to interpret it, you either end up with contradictions or undefined situations or things that you might think may perhaps require modifications, but these would also affect normal situations which you don't want. Okay, so in this setting, what we found, when we analyzed this kind of thing with our factor graph representation, actually it does handle these confusing Gedanken experiments unambiguously and without contradictions. To me, this is my personal all-time favorite paper, but that's very personal. I don't think it was much noticed, actually, but I like this a lot. Okay, different topic. Okay, analog to digital conversion is, so the first thing is to understand, analog to digital conversion is not so easy, although it's everywhere, of course. Any device you have, right, your phone, these converters are everywhere, but, that something is everywhere doesn't know it's easy, right, and obvious. So let's kind of the first year course on this thing would say, you first have to you sample and you do a quantizer and that's it, and then but this is the point is this kind of thing scales very poorly if you want any high resolution. Namely, the fundamental thing about analog circuits is that low precision stuff can be done very simply. High precision stuff is extremely expensive. So if you just want to increase the resolution at the end by one single bit, the cost in power it goes up by a factor of at least 4, typically more 8. So that is fundamental scaling of if you do analog circuits by just trying to make circuits more precise. That's true for all analog design. Then many different ways to have been used beyond this simple thing here, and as just modern analog to digital converters that the high performance stuff in your phones and so are very complex analog digital systems that require calibration and so on and so on. And for years ago, get back to trying to rethink it. What we really do, we have a digital part and an analog part. Somehow they interact. So and the digital part is about inferring the analog part based on these interactions and measurements. And that is pretty vague at this point. But actually, we came up with a new conversion principle. Which actually I'm glad to see Georg Wilkins himself is here, had first formulated this idea, and then it was worked out, into amazing body of knowledge by Hampus Malmberg here today too. So here is the analog part, which is in this case is some sort of analog linear filter, and then what you see here are samples and quantizers. So at first it looks strange. So didn't we say on the previous slide that sampling quantizing is kind of a very a limited thing to go, and instead you have replaced one with many. The point is these samples and quantizers now don't have to be precise. The precision requirement is very basically these can be very, very imprecise. So that's not where the power goes here. They can be very imprecise, and yet so in this scheme the precision that you get out of this converter is not at all related to there's always fine print, of course, but fundamentally unrelated to precision of these things here. So I'm not exactly explaining how it works, right? That's not the proper place. Maybe I should add something. So for, there may be some experts in the room, there's at least one whom I know is an expert. Say, wait a minute, are you kidding? This is just a continuous time delta sigma converter. That's true. So what we do here is a generalization, but it's a proper generalization, and the viewpoint is entirely different. Just for example, you can have higher order filters here without any problem, stability problems. So the calibration is Hampus has shown us how to calibrate such a thing by just doing stuff here, just on the digital side, no calibration on the analog side, which is very nice. And here, this topic also gives me the satisfaction of having the opportunity to mention George Moschitz here, who was my predecessor in this position from which I am now retiring. A very fine teacher and an exemplary gentleman, and also was department head of this department at one time. And there are some in the audience who remember him very fondly as well. So that's very nice. So here in this part, analyzing and designing these things, it suddenly turns out, and I use stuff that I learned in the courses by George Moschitz. And one of these filters is we have a leapfrog converter with this leapfrog filter structure, and this is something I learned in the courses by George Moschitz, and it's very nice how things come back. That if fundamentals always will have their place, and that was a nice thing to do. There's also a more general thing behind this. I phrased this analog to digital conversion, but in a way it's more. It's really, if you think about what is going on here, and Hampus has emphasized this point, it's really a step into a more general perspective of combining sensing and acting, and doing this in the proper way, and knowing what has to be analog, what digital, and how to do it. Okay. This is my last Vista point here. Remember that biological neuron that I mentioned at the very beginning. So we are back to that topic. So continuous time spike in neural networks, that's something, that's what biological neural networks do, and something which everybody for a long time thought in a way that would be very cool to be able to use that kind of thing for engineering, but we're not quite there. There are lots of things which are not well understood at all from the engineering point of view. And so this is a bit of a contribution to the engineering view of such things. In particular, it's about temporal coherence. So let me go to the next slide to see what we mean. So thinking about we have the neurons are noisy, which means why are they noisy? So what? First of all, what does it mean? That means the output jitters a bit. It produces a spike, but never exactly a normal position, but a little before or after in a random way. And sometimes they fail to produce a spike or produce a freak firing. And why is that essential? Because that's what we expect to happen in biology, of course, and also engineering. Remember when we talked about the converters? So doing anything with precision in analog is super expensive and a bad idea. So you should do stuff in these are talking about analog circuits here. You should do stuff with low precision components, but get precision at a system level. That's the way to go. But then. Can we do that? And so if here in this PhD project by Hugo, that was defense was just very recently. It's about demonstrating a recurrent neural network that can stably reproduce its memorized content. What do you mean by memorized content? I mean. Take a couple of neurons, doesn't matter, 5 or 500, and say, I want them to fire in this sequence. So you just make such a picture. This is I want you to remember. And then Igor can compute weights for this network, such that if you kick this thing on, it will reproduce this content, the one that you specified, essentially forever stably, despite the fact that you have these noisy neurons. Okay. And they, how long can this be? What is the fundamental parameter that affects the scaling? How long can, and how much, how long can such a memorized content be? It's fundamentally, it appears to be at least linear in the number of synapses. It's completely independent of the number of neurons. It's about the number of synapses, which is the right scaling if you are thinking in terms of hardware or in terms of biology. That's how it ought to be. Okay. So think of this as a self-correcting dynamic representation of information, which goes back to the topic of error correcting codes. Remember the Vista point number 1. So this is about error correction in some sense, but it combines, storage and correction and something that goes in time within the same thing. So that's it's a very interesting thing to think about. Okay, but this can be done at all. That is certainly an interesting thing. This is, as it is, it's not something that has any immediate practical use. So that's important because the weights are computed offline. So this is not a proposal for anything practical, but it does suggest practical possibilities. You can work. It's possible to operate recurrent neural networks autonomously without being synced to some external stimulus in a way that is, in a global temporal coherence, in a global stability, almost like a digital processor. Okay, so these were my Vista points. So that's the end. Time to say thanks. Thank you for a great time. Thanks. I had wonderful colleagues at ETH. Amos, of course, who has become is a dear colleague and friend, and many others. Department staff, Peter has always been very helpful. As it so happens, over the years, because of various little jobs I had at the department, I did a lot of projects over the years with Reto Kreutzer, and I think we're a very good team. Then, thanks so much for the easy stuff. Again, it's always a ... So Paddy Strebel was kind of the one pillar of our institute for many years, who did everything, electronics, measurement devices, printing, using a 3D printer to make a little box or something that we needed, everything at all. More recently, Stefan has been the person on which everything is dumped, and Stefan is a wonderful person. He's a senior scientist and actually a professor himself in Taiwan, not here. Okay, thank you so much. And all my secretaries over the years, Bernadette wanted to be here, but can't, but at least Renate is here. That's very nice. She was actually Jim Massey's secretary, and I know her from those days, and it's wonderful that you can hear me tonight. And of course, Simon, I'm a present secretary, and we will retire together at the end of July. So, okay. Then, of course, in the center stage, PhD students, as other professors have noted before, it's such a privilege to work with brilliant young people, to learn together, to explore together, to share enthusiasms, to share frustrations. Thank you all. Thank you for bearing with me, and it's wonderful. Has been wonderful, and those of you who are here, thank you. Of course, old friends, Felix Zarko is here. Thomas, I'm not sure whether he's here. And of course, many others which I cannot mention all of them here. Okay. There's a reception outside for almost everybody. However, the former and present members of our lab, the reception outside is not for you. Please proceed directly to the restaurant. Thank you.